Hi, it's Karis, and this is my Module 9 Padlet discussion about remarriage. So, starting off with the first question on the Step Parents video, personal reflection on family dynamic and what stood out to me. I wrote quite a few things, but something that stuck out to me was from both parents who remarried when they read the notes. And I loved how different but similar their takes on both step parents were towards their children and just how much they showed their feelings while reading the letters. So for Nak's dad, I loved how he admires the stepdad's love for his ex-wife and the example that he's setting for his child, Nak. I love how he was expressing his feelings, saying that he feels like he should hate the dad because it's not him, but he doesn't, and he loves how much he shows his love to not only the son, but his now ex-wife. And then for the wife, or the mom of Nak, I put how she just emphasized how loving of a stepmom Nak's stepmom is to him, and that she realized that she's not replaced as a mom, but that she's blessed now because she gets to see another mom love him just as much as she does. So I thought that was just really awesome to see. On question 2, which is one thing in the chapter that could support this type of structure and support in this family dynamic from the video, was the quality of remarried life. That's what I chose. And then I put marital relationships of the remarried can be satisfying as that of the first married. And I completely agree with that. I think that's so important to emphasize because it can be scary. Like, I've obviously never been married, but I can't imagine how scary it is to remarry someone and just have all the what ifs going on. And I think when you change the what ifs from a negative to a positive light, it can bring so much light into the situation, and people realize that maybe being remarried is something they needed in their life. Not needed as in like they had to be remarried, but more so needed as like, wow, like this can be as good, if not better, than my first marriage was. For question 3, after reading textbook myths about marriage, and which one stuck out to me or why I thought it was harmful, I chose consider other people first myth. That's what I chose. And I find this harmful because you will start neglecting your own needs, hence problems will show up later. And then I also put nothing will get resolved, and instead it'll be pushed down or aside. I think this is important for both partners in the marriage to consider because coming from someone who used to always put others before herself, you really need the type of communication in marriage where you are constantly sharing your feelings through vulnerability or any type of emotion. Obviously, there's self-control in those things, but when you're having problems or things are going well, it's good to communicate all of the things ahead of time. And I think the reason people push aside their needs in new marriages is because they're afraid from things that happened in their past marriage and they don't want to mess anything up. So they constantly focus on what the other person wants and needs when they should be communicating what they want and need as well, because you need a balance in both people. For the 4th question, after reading the article, one thing that I found interesting or valuable is practicing being vulnerable in small steps. I think this is so important because I'm not married, but I am in a healthy relationship, and vulnerability is so important. But I will say that especially for people who remarry, it's so common for them to carry over trauma or things that went wrong in their old marriage into the new one. And so being vulnerable is important, yes, so you can explain your feelings to your partner, but doing it in small steps can avoid becoming overwhelmed with things. And it can avoid stress too, because or not avoid, but like maybe prevent it to a degree. And it helps to build trust slowly and build comfortability in the marriage too. And then finally, after watching the TED Talk and listing one thing I found interesting from the video, I wrote down the question one that she said about sacrifice should be thought of as a fair exchange, and the what are you willing to give and what are you willing to owe. And then I put sacrifices should not be one-sided and serious convos should be had early on. In the example when she talked about the girl who went to med school and the guy who basically worked for years, it's pretty easy to see why he built up resentment and an alcohol problem later on. And also, you can see the girl's side of why she didn't want to stay with him. But at the same time, they should have had conversations about how hard that was going to be before they were married. And they could have come up with compromises early on. Like, for example, like she said in the video, the girl could have also gotten a part-time job in med school so she could help support her spouse. And he also could have communicated his feelings on wanting to maybe work a little less sometimes, like on the weekends, or they could have even talked about just spending more time together as a couple, because he was working night shifts and she was at med school all day, so they barely got any time together. But yeah, that's the end of my palette discussion, and thank you for watching.